Welcome everybody to this webinar on financing R&D jobs in companies through the Marie Skłodowska-Curie individual fellowships. This session is actually organized by Euresearch. Euresearch is an association based in Switzerland and having a public mandate from the Swiss Confederation to inform, advise, and accompany all kinds of research-intensive organizations in securing European research and innovation funding. We're having a public mandate free of charge, and we're working across all Switzerland. I will explain a bit later how we function exactly. So welcome to this session. My name is Euresearch. I'm the company advisor for Euresearch for the region Go. I will just remind some very small rules about this webinar. First of all, as already announced in the invitation, it is a recorded webinar. We just hope that people who cannot attend today can see the slides later on. The follow-up will be provided through email with all the presentations, and we kindly ask you to stay on mute for this webinar. You can use the chat actually to ask your questions to myself, to Sibila, as well as to Panayotis, who will join us later to actually speak about his testimonial. You can simply, if you want to address myself, Sibila, or Panayotis specifically, mention I, S, or P letter at the beginning of your question. That will actually help me to sort out the questions for the Q&A session. Agenda in brief, just to remind you what are the main parts of this webinar. First of all, I will concentrate on, generally speaking, on the tools and services to companies from Euresearch, and the other, mention briefly the other grants which are available, and what's in for companies with the Marie Curie Individual Fellowship, which is the main point of today's webinar. Then I'll give the floor to Dr. Sibila Martinelli, our national contact point for the Marie Curie Actions, and she will actually really provide the in-depth content about this very interesting grant to recruit researchers in companies. How does it function? What are the eligibility criteria? What are the evaluation criteria for the proposal? And what does Euresearch provide as support to actually prepare those proposals and submit them? After that, we will move on to the testimonial by Dr. Panayotis Moutis, who works for Depsis SA. Depsis SA, as some of you might know, is a very successful scale-up based in Switzerland, in Vaud. And this company is very successful in securing research and innovation grants from the European Union, as well as very successful in securing Marie Curie individual fellowships. Actually, Panayotis, his first name is Panos, simplified, is the first grantee that Depsis was able to take on board through the Marie Curie individual fellowship. And he will provide both the grantee perspective as well as the company perspective. I think both of them today are very interesting because I saw through the registrations that a number of people joined from research institutions abroad. So I understand that they might be future candidates for some Marie Curie individual fellowships. And I'm also very happy to see a lot of both startups as well as bigger companies in this webinar. We will actually end this webinar with a Q&A session with a wrap-up and conclusion shortly. And now I will come into the introductory section. We'll basically talk with you about some of the general rules of the European grants and the services of Euresearch. So, first of all, Marie Curie individual fellowships, which are the focus of today's session, will be part of Horizon 2020. Horizon 2020 is the research and innovation framework which is running until the end of this year and which provides a lot of funding for research-intensive companies as well as other organizations. Specifically, it covers research, prototyping, piloting, as well as launch and production of innovative products and services. What is interesting here is that it covers in non-dilutive direct funding 70 or 100% of project costs in companies, and it also provides blended finance solutions for the production and launch of products. Typically, any company or any participating organization ideally has to identify a specific opportunity, prepare a successful proposal, application, and then if funded, manage it grant. And in all of these steps, Euresearch provides services. Specifically for the companies, it will be provided by the company advisor in the region, as well as the so-called NCPs, national contact points, who are specific thematic specialists in our organization, such as Sibylla Martinelli, for example, for the Marie Curie individual fellowship. Behind the money, which are very important, you find also a lot of other advantages in participating in European projects. Specifically, you can access talents and fund those talents, and this is typically the case with the Marie Curie individual fellowships and other Marie Curie grants. But you can also accelerate your business through calls such as the EIC Accelerator. I will briefly mention it afterwards. And you can also expand your network and provide visibility for your solutions in collaborative projects where you will be involved in R&D work with other organizations across Europe. It could be companies, hospitals, municipalities, academia, research institutes. There's a lot of opportunities for different stages of research and innovation. Just to provide you a few numbers to convince you that this is a very interesting tool. Since 2014, when the Horizon 2020 program started, we have just for Switzerland by now nearly 750 projects running with Swiss SMEs. I'm not counting here big corporations simply because I was not able through the European statistics to identify those numbers, but there's a lot of big corporates participating also. And just these numbers for the SMEs, it means 184 million euros invested directly by the European Commission in these projects. You can see on these slides just a few logotypes of companies from Continental who won EIC accelerated projects, Marie Curie grants, who collaborate in consortia running diverse projects. Now I'd like to just briefly stop on one point, remind you that behind the Marie Curie individual fellowships, which is the grant on which we concentrate today and which has a deadline in September 9 for the applications, there's a few other interesting opportunities not to be missed in 2020, and that if they represent interest for you, the best would be to contact your company advisor in the region to explore those. And typically here I show those opportunities depending on the TRL, the technology readiness level, as well as broadly the scope of the consortia. going from a single partner project to large consortia. You can see that there are some deadlines in October for the EIC Accelerator, which is for SMEs only, but extremely interesting, providing up to 2.5 million euros in grants, plus equity funding actually for the launch, the commercial launch of the product or services. There is the EIC Fast Track to Innovation end of October, which is very similar to the EIC Accelerator in scope, but allowing small consortia composed of big corporations as well as SMEs or academia to work on last stages of product or service development. There are the top-down collaborative thematic calls, which have different deadlines and need to be explored really through contacts with company advisors and MCPs. A very important opportunity, which will have a deadline in January 2021 with an opening at mid-September of the call, is the Green Deal call, which spans through 11 different areas. These are collaborative projects which will be able to be run by consortia and will certainly represent interest for a number of companies as well as academic institutions and others. So for the moment being, we concentrate on Marie Curie, but please note that all of these is also accessible and we can discuss that at any point in time. Now, just very briefly, what's in Marie Curie for individual fellowship for companies as well as for researchers. In my view, from the company perspective, this is financing for experienced researchers to join your R&D department and work on projects which are vital, important for your development, but which maybe you cannot secure otherwise. So this is really about getting specialized expertise and expanding your R&D capabilities. It's both interesting for small startups as well as for big corporates. So today, the session is really open for everybody. And what is the perspective for a researcher? Basically, it's to propose yourself as a potential qualified, experienced R&D employee in a company, or of course an academic institution also, but today we concentrate on companies. It might sound anecdotic mentioned like this, but I had several cases where experienced researchers knowing about this Marie Curie individual fellowship opportunity actually approached companies which are working in their field and proposed themselves as potential grantees. So people who joined us today as researchers can really envisage this perspective, and they will get a lot of information about how these grants are actually functioning for the future. So if you are interested in Marie Curie individual fellowships, but of course in other opportunities, how do you proceed? You contact Euresearch. We have a website. As I mentioned, we have offices all over Switzerland, which provide specific support to companies and organizations based in both regions. We have a head office also in Bern, which hosts all our national contact points, the thematic specialists of specific programs such as Sibylla. So you can contact either the company advisor if you're a company, or contact our NCPs directly. For companies based in Vaud, you have my coordinates here on slides, and of course you have my coordinates in the email from the invitation. I'm basically stopping here my part of the presentation, and I would like to give the floor to Sibylla. I will first disconnect my presentation. And Sibylla, who is our national contact point for Marie Curie individual fellowship. If you have any questions on this introduction, don't hesitate to put them in the chat, and continue, of course, for the other presenters too. Right. I should be able
Okay, thank you very much, Irina. I take over now. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So, my name is Sibylla Martinelli, and as Irina said, I'm one of the 2 Swiss national contact points for the Marie Curie Actions, meaning that we are actually in charge of this program here in Switzerland. Today, I will not touch upon any other action than the individual fellowship, but in case you ever get interested in one of the others, I would like to invite you to check on the official MSCA website, which is indicated on the bottom of this slide. What all the Marie Curie actions share is their emphasis on mobility, on researchers' training, and on career development. Today, I want you to get an idea of what the individual fellowships are about and of what kind of opportunities they hold for your company. I will introduce or translate some definitions used by the European Commission into your company's language, because knowing what those expressions mean will facilitate your understanding of the rest that is presented today. You will get to know eligibility criteria. You will also get some information on call statistics, and you will learn about proposal structure. And last but very importantly, you will learn what kind of support and training you can get and where to turn to in case you're interested in applying for a Marie Curie fellowship, and what can be your possible next steps to take. So what are these fellowships? From a company's perspective, the MSCA fellowships are an opportunity to hire researchers on the expense of the EU, because salary, research, and other costs for up to 2 years are all covered by the EU funding. And from the researcher's perspective, these fellowships can be opportunities for giving their career a boost by working abroad. Like the individual fellowships are individual, transnational fellowships. This is important, and they are awarded to the best or the most promising researchers. One very important aspect of the IF, the individual fellowship, is mobility. The European Commission wants to foster mobility of excellent researchers, to broaden their competences and diversify their set of skills. And according to the EC, mobility should not only be international, so crossing borders of countries, but also intersectoral and interdisciplinary. I will explain a bit later how mobility, the cross-border between countries mobility, has to be considered. Yeah, by the way, the Marie Curie Actions got their name from Marie Curie, obviously, who was an excellent researcher, who was also genuinely mobile, and she was convinced that scientific training and science in general should be international, already quite a while ago. So individual fellowships, they provide opportunities to acquire new skills and to transfer new knowledge by working on research and innovation in Europe and beyond. Talking about acquisition of new skills brings me to the second main emphasis in the IF, which is the training of researchers and their career development. So in such a fellowship, the researchers should be able to acquire new skills and new knowledge to fill up gaps in their set of skills, the set of skills they will need to establish themselves as independent researcher, be it in academia or also in the private sector. So you can feel already now that the Marie Curie Individual Fellowship is not just a regular research proposal, but with a strong focus on mobility, training, and career development of the researchers. It is more than a regular research project. An excellent research project, so the scientific content of it is of course the basis, of the fellowship, but this project should be carried out at the most appropriate host institution under the supervision of a suitable supervisor. So now I already used a lot of the European Commission's jargon, expressions like host, institution, etc. And before I start looking closer into the IF, I would like to explain some of these expressions used by the European Commission. So a researcher needs an appropriate host institution, and this institution has mandatorily to be located in an EU member state or a country associated to Horizon 2020. This institution has to be active in research or research training, and it can be, importantly, from the academic or the non-academic sector. So if you would like to host a researcher in your company during his or her fellowship, your company could be this host institution. In the proposal, there is one section dedicated to the description of the hosting and the host institution, actually. We will see that later. A researcher benefiting from an individual fellowship needs to have a person supervising his or her activities during the project. And this person is the so-called supervisor. So this supervisor could be someone in your company, for example, who has the necessary experience and skills, and of course also the capacity to supervise a researcher during this time of the individual fellowship. In the proposal, there is also one section where the quality of the supervision needs to be described. The beneficiary is the legal entity that signs the grant agreement and has the complete responsibility for the proper implementation of the project. It contributes directly to the implementation of the research, of the transfer of knowledge and the training activities by recruiting, supervising, hosting or training such an individual fellowship funded researcher. So in case your company would host a researcher with an individual fellowship, the company would be the beneficiary, signing the grant, receiving the money from the EU, and with this recruiting the researcher on a regular work contract, paying his or her salary and research costs from the money received from the EU. And the individual fellowship not only has a beneficiary, but also a grantee. So the fellow who will finally receive the grant in the form of salary and research costs. And once you submit the proposal with a specific candidate, the money can't be used for the same project carried out by a different researcher, because the IF is personal funding. So specifically dedicated to a certain researcher who had to describe his or her capacity and his or her track record in the proposal, which was actually evaluated and funded in case. In the course of this presentation, I will refer to the grantee as simply the researcher. So you heard so far that it takes an excellent research project, an excellent postdoctoral researcher, a host institution, for example, your company, and a supervisor, etc. But how does such a fellowship work then? I already touched upon this a little bit. The researcher can only apply with a specific host institution who is willing to host him or her and who is also appointing the future supervisor. So this is kind of a bundle. And often, and rather in the academic environment, researchers approach their future supervisors and also host institutions and draft a proposal with the help of them. In the private sector, it is often the other way around, that companies are looking for researchers coming to work on a project with them with an individual fellowship. And once the project gets the funding, the money goes to the host, so it would be then your company, which then recruits the fellow on a regular work contract for the duration of the whole project. Yes, companies often look for suitable candidates via different channels. I will talk about ways to find suitable candidates a bit later in my presentation. On an institutional level, a good reason to apply for an individual fellowship is that institutions, so for example, companies, can host researchers working on projects funded by the EU. And with the help of an IF, researchers can diversify their competencies and acquire new skills through advanced training and mobility, through working on a research project somewhere at a specific host institution. There are different subtypes of the individual fellowships, all of which are open for applicants with a company as host institution. So basically, all of them are open for companies, but I would strongly recommend applying for the Society and Enterprise panel, which is one specific subtype on which we will focus today in order to keep it simple and to focus on the important things. The Society and Enterprise panel is a multidisciplinary panel of the individual fellowships. It is dedicated to career opportunities for researchers who want to work on research and innovation projects in an organization from the private sector, from the non-academic sector. And as the name says, in this subtype, the host institution must be an entity from the non-academic sector. And any entities with capital or legal link must also be from the non-academic sector. And for this panel, there's an earmarked budget of 10 million euro per call. And in the last few years, the success rate in this panel was higher than in the rest of the other types of the individual fellowship. In last year's call, there were in total 9,709 eligible proposals submitted. And of those 9,709, 1,475 proposals were funded, actually, were retained for funding. In the outer ring of this donut, you see the numbers of submitted proposals, and in the inner ring, the number of successful proposals. You see that the majority of proposals, like 7,602, were submitted as standard European fellowships. And you can see also that the success rates were higher in the global, in the career restart, the reintegration, and the Society and Enterprise panel than in the standard type, quite a bit higher. This has to do with a special weighting that was applied and with the reserved budget for the Society and Enterprise panel. And I show you here the success rates of last year's call. The Society and Enterprise panel had the highest success rate in last year's call, as you see on this slide, followed by the Global Fellowships and the RI and CAR subtype, which is for today we will not touch. The overall success rate across all panels was 15%. So you see, compared to the SNE with 27, it's quite a difference there. On this slide, I show you the successful European fellowships in the different calls since the start of Horizon 2020. And I'm only showing you this to give you an idea of the number of fellowships funded in the SNE panel every year. So it's roughly 50 proposals in this panel that are funded per year. And you see here that last year there were 10 submissions from Switzerland in this panel, and 8 of them were funded. It was not as extreme, and not always as extreme in the previous calls as in last year's call, but the success rate has always been higher in this specific panel. So to write such an individual fellowship project, some conditions need to be fulfilled, or to hire a researcher with such an individual fellowship project, some conditions need to be fulfilled. Basically, there are two eligibility criteria for the individual fellowship. So it's, on the one hand, it's the mobility, and on the other hand, it's research experience. The European Commission, as I mentioned, wants researchers to gain international experience. So in order to be eligible, they need to comply with the so-called mobility rule, which says that the researcher should not have worked or lived for more than 3 years in the 5 years prior to the call deadline in the country of the future host institution. So for you in Switzerland, let's say. So a bit of special case is CERN. Moving from CERN to a company in Switzerland is not considered as international mobility, as the researcher has been working already in Switzerland. So in this case, there is still a possibility that the researcher could choose a company in Switzerland as host institution. He or she just has to comply then with the mobility rule. So if he or she hasn't been working at CERN for more than 3 years in the 5 years prior to the call deadline, he or she would still be eligible. If a researcher from a company or other institution based in Switzerland wants to move to CERN, because CERN is an international organization and has a special status. So if someone wants to move to CERN, this would be considered as mobility, because CERN is an international organization. The second condition that needs to be fulfilled is that a researcher either needs to have a PhD degree to be eligible, or 4 years of full-time equivalent research experience. And this is not negotiable. So the IFs are basically a postdoctoral funding instrument. Research that has been done in any kind of research environment is acceptable, academic or non-academic. So in order to count towards the 4 years of research experience. Other than regarding the mobility and experience of researchers, there aren't any limitations as for example, on nationality, on age, or on gender. So researchers can be from any part in the world, have any age or gender. It's just that even though there is no limitation from the EU side in terms of nationality, it is of course less complicated to hire people from the EU because of issues related to work permit or visa. But there are several examples of companies that have a long experience with hiring people from non-EU countries. Some companies don't shy away from hiring people from India, China, and I just mentioned this to say it's possible. Furthermore, there aren't any limitations with regard to the research area. The individual fellowship, as all Marie Curie actions, have a so-called bottom-up approach, meaning that research fields are chosen freely by the applicants. All domains of research and technological development are eligible for funding. Yes, and as research is not only done for the fame, but also for the living, you're probably interested in knowing what is in for your company and of course for a researcher applying for a fellowship with your company. So the project's eligible costs are not related to the real cost of the project, but they are calculated exclusively based on fixed units. And there are different cost categories. Basically, there are the researcher unit costs and the institutional unit costs. Researcher unit costs are divided into living allowance, mobility allowance, and family allowance. And the living allowance is the EU contribution to the gross salary costs of the researcher and amounts to €4,880 per month. It can only be used to this end, actually. And this amount is adjusted through the application of a country correction coefficient for the cost of living according to the country in which the beneficiary is located. And for the outgoing phase, no, this is not something to mention here because there's no outgoing phase. There are, besides the living allowance, there is also mobility allowance that is paid to the researchers, and if they're eligible for it, there's also the family allowance that is in addition to the living and mobility allowance paid as a fixed amount per month. So €500 if a researcher has family obligations. Yes, and then there are the institutional unit costs. This is composed of the research training and networking costs, which amount to €800 per month. And they are managed by the beneficiary to contribute to expenses related to, for example, costs for training and networking activities, or also costs for research expenses, of course, and also costs for visa-related fees, travel expenses, or such costs. So these research training and networking costs, they should really be used for the activities that were already described in part B of the proposal. However, unused amounts. So if after 24 months of the project or runtime, if there is any money left here, this doesn't have to be given back, but this can actually be used to top up salaries. And then there's a last cost category. This is management and indirect costs. And these amount to €650 per month. And this is to be used for the management and indirect cost of the project. So yes, for the management of the project. And also here, unused amounts can be used to increase the salary of the researcher, for example. I give you an example of a French researcher without family obligation who applies for a 24-month individual fellowship jointly with a university in Germany. I mentioned the university's location because this will have an influence on the country correction coefficient. You see here that the project's eligible costs, as I mentioned before, are not related to real costs of the project, but they are really calculated exclusively based on these fixed units. I hope this is understandable. So, like, for example, the living allowance here is €4,880 per month. And this researcher is spending the 24 months in Germany, so it is the €4,880 per month are €4,880 are multiplied times 24, and also with the country correction coefficient of 0.97. So, and then we end up with a living allowance of €113,606 for the total duration of the project. And then, in addition, there is the mobility allowance. Also, this €600 per month that are this unit is multiplied times 24, and you end up with €14,400. And in total, you will have these researcher costs amounting to €128,000 roughly. And in addition to that, now I have to move your faces a bit. In addition to that, there's the institutional unit costs that amount to roughly €34,800. And together with the researcher's cost, it will be a total grant amount of €162,806 for the 2 years of fellowship. For Switzerland, the country correction coefficient is 1.212. So the living allowance is multiplied times 24, and times 1.212. And this will be 141,000 euro roughly for the 2 years. So in total, the researcher unit costs for a 24-month project in Switzerland will amount to 156,000 euro. And together with the 34,800 euro institutional unit costs, the total grant amount will be 191,000 euro roughly, which are roughly 206,000 Swiss francs. So that's what you get for a 2-year individual fellowship. Two things are important to note. The amounts just presented are gross amounts. The net salary results from deducting compulsory social security contributions, as well as direct taxes from the gross amounts. And the budget is automatically calculated based on your entries regarding duration of the fellowship, host nationality, and family status. Information that you provide during the submission of the project. So, taken together what I just explained, we can say that the EU covers costs related to the recruitment of the researcher, to research, training and networking costs, and also to management and indirect costs. The maximum grant amount is fixed in the grant agreement the beneficiary will sign. And every employer is free to top up the salary of the researcher. The MSCA amounts indicate the minimum that needs to be paid, but the institution hosting the fellow is free to top up the salary, of course. So if you think applying with a researcher for an IF could be a good option for you, just make sure that your company, meaning the host institution, is active in research, located in an EU member state or country associated to Horizon 2020, which Switzerland actually is. Then that it can offer the appropriate infrastructure, and there should be also someone who can supervise the fellow, and you should be able to offer appropriate training as well. And if you decide to go for an application and you want to host a researcher working on a research project that is funded by the EU, and if you could offer a good environment and fulfill the different criteria, you still need to find a researcher to apply together with you. Who could be a suitable candidate? So this person can be man or woman, can be from any nation or of any age. She or he should just have enough research experience and comply with the mobility rule. These are the two criteria that need to be fulfilled. So mobility rule means that your candidate should not have spent more than 3 years in the 5 years prior to the call deadline in Switzerland. This year's call deadline is on the 9th of September. So in practice, this means that you could even apply together with a candidate who has already been working in your company for a while, just not longer than 3 years in the 5 years before the 9th of September this year. But if there isn't a candidate working in your company, there are different ways of identifying suitable candidates. Just a remark, if you're not sure about the eligibility of a certain candidate, we really like to encourage you to contact us. We will be happy to check with you the eligibility of candidates. So here I show you the different ways to go. So either you have identified a suitable candidate in your team who is eligible to apply for an IF, or you look for eligible candidates on the market. And with such candidates, you have two options. Either you recruit the candidate anyway and then apply for an IF, or you make a deal with such a candidate from the market that he or she will be hired once the proposal was funded, so the project was funded. Okay, and in any of these scenarios, again, I'd like to stress that you can always ask for Euresearch support during any of the steps of this process. there are different platforms that aim to facilitate partner search. This is the first platform. It's called Euresearch. It is financed by the EU in order to support mobile researchers. And here on this platform, you can place job offers or expressions of interest to host researchers at your company, for example. Or you can also look for candidates there, because they also post candidates' expression of interest. And here's a second platform where you can place expressions of interest. It is a European project called Net for Mobility that offers this platform. It is actually the network of Marie Curie Actions NCPs worldwide. And this project and the website has an expressions of interest page. What you could also do is to post job offers on your company's jobs page, like for example, Depsis does. This is also a good way of attracting candidates. And the last way of finding suitable candidates is to post job offers on job sites of universities, of course, because there might also be suitable candidates interested in working on a project with you. So the proposal actually is composed of basically 3 parts: Part A, Part B1, and Part B2. Each applicant must fill in the administrative forms in Part A for the proposal, and this is then used in the evaluation and further, or rather in the examination of eligibility, and also in the further processing of the proposal. Part A is an integral part of the proposal, and it has a number of mandatory fields, such as things that information that you need to provide, such as name of the supervisor, researcher, duration of the intended fellowship, etc. So these are more administrative data that need to be provided. And there's Part B1, and as Part B1 of their proposals, applicants must submit 2 separate PDF documents, Part B1 and Part B2, also as Part B. And for Part B1, the maximum length is 10 pages, and this is basically the heart of the IF proposal. There you describe the scientific content of the project and many other things. So it is composed of 3 sections: excellence, impacts, and implementation. And some of you might recognize these 3 parts from other proposals like the EIC, but it's really just the name of these evaluation criteria. The skeleton, that is the same. The content is largely different. And here, of a maximum of 10 pages, which applies to sections 1, 2, 3, the applicants can decide freely on the allocation of pages between the sections. Yes, but it's just that the overall page limit should be respected, because that is handled quite strictly. Yes, and there's a template available of this Part B1 of the individual fellowship proposal. This is available on the call page in a rich text format version. Yes, and we strongly advise to use this template actually, and to really stick to it for the proposal writing. Yes, and this is just to illustrate that the focus of these kinds and the content of these kinds of projects is really completely different than in EIC. And also to give you a taste of what kind of information needs to be provided in this proposal, in an IF proposal. Now I show you here the titles of the different sub-chapters in these 3 sections. So this is the first section, the excellence section. It is about the excellence of the proposed research. project, and also about the excellence actually of the researcher. So in the first sub-chapter, you need to describe the quality of the research, and then in a second chapter, the quality of the training and transfer of knowledge. In the third sub-chapter, it is described the quality of the supervision and of the hosting. And in the fourth one, you describe the potential of the researcher to reach scientific independence. In the impact part, it has to be described how the fellowship can enhance the researcher's career perspectives, and also how the project results are disseminated, and what kind of communication activities will be undertaken. So that is in the impact part. And then in the implementation part, a work plan should be described, and also how the management of the project will be handled. And in the very last chapter, the researcher needs also to provide information about the institutional environment, and this time related to infrastructure. So can the project really be carried out at this chosen host? Is there every infrastructure that is needed, or in case not, how is that handled? And that is actually what is evaluated. So what you describe in the excellence, impact, and implementation part. And you also need to provide a CV in part B2, which is also read by the evaluators, but which is not evaluated. So the evaluation is really done with part B1. Yes, and of course the information provided in parts A and B should be fully consistent. So if you fill in the administrative forms in part A, they should be consistent with what you provide in your CV, for example, or also in part B1, in the core of the proposal. For the CV, you can spend up to 5 pages maximally, and it's just also the standard academic and research record that it should include. Then also in part B2, a list of all participating organizations indicating the legal entity, name, the department carrying out the work, and the supervisor should be provided. Then there's a section 6 about ethical aspects of the project. And this is not in section 7 is not applying for the SME panel, but only to the global fellowships. There needs to be a letter of commitment provided from the partnering hosting institution. But this does not apply to the society and enterprise panel. So in the proposal preparation, usually there is a project idea first. Either this idea comes from a researcher or from the hosting institution. So maybe you currently have an idea of a project on which such a researcher could work at your company, and both is fine actually. Then based on this idea, there should be discussions, of course, between researcher and supervisor. And then usually, but not exclusively, the proposal, or at least a large part of it, is written by the researcher. And also usually, but not always, the researcher will get some feedback from his or her supervisor, and can improve then the proposal accordingly. And there's also the possibility actually to get feedback from Isabel and myself before the submission. So this is how it usually works. It's not a rule to do it like that, actually. It's just how this process usually works. Yes, and just the submission of the project, the proposal, is done together by the researcher and the supervisor. If you are interested in more information, or if you want to prepare for proposal writing, you should best familiarize yourself with the Guide for Applicants. This is kind of a user's manual for the individual fellowships. And there's another important document which is more giving more information about the policy background that might also be interesting to keep in the back of your head while writing such a fellowship. And this is the MSCA part of the work program, the Horizon 2020 work program. Yes, and in case you will have questions or need clarifications, please just get in touch with us. My colleague Isabel and I, the national contact points, we offer IF proposal writing trainings in different cities in Switzerland to help applicants to write a competitive proposal, basically. Yes, and due to this year's special situation, we will hold this every one of those trainings online. There's still almost one-day training events, yeah, and there will actually be one dedicated to companies. You find all the events here on the events page, but the one dedicated to companies will take place, it's the 27th of July, I think we chose as a date. But surely if you go to this Euresearch events page, you will find this one in due course. It's not published yet, but we will publish this in the next days. Yes, furthermore, for applicants with Swiss host institutions, we offer access to our online tutorial. We established such a tutorial, and to get access, you can just get an account on the Euresearch website and then write an informal email to msca@euresearch.ch, providing information on your future host and supervisor. And then your name will be put on a list of users, and you will be able to access then the tutorial via a specific MSCA page on the Euresearch website. Yes, and for those who prefer written documents, we prepared basically the same content as in the online tutorial as an annotated version of this year's Guide for Applicants. If you're interested to get this, please, you can also just write an email indicating your future host and supervisor, and we will send you one. And yes, importantly, if you wrote a proposal and it's in an almost final version, and you would like to get our feedback before submission, we offer proposal reviews. Either written feedback, you will get either the possibility of getting written feedback, or we also offer in late August, I think, several occasions of 1 hour consultations via Skype discussing your proposal. So this is a service we offer on a first come, first served basis. So yes, this year the IF 2020 call has been open since 9 April, and it will close on the 9th of September this year. The evaluation of the proposals will take place between October and December, and the results will be communicated in February 21, so February next year. So the first possible starting date is the 1st March next year, and the last possible starting date will be the 1st September 22. Actually, this is quite important to note that in case you will receive the funding, you can postpone the start of your fellowship for up to 18 months. So no need to start exactly at 1st March next year. This is just the first possible starting date, but you can actually postpone the start until 1st September 22, which can be quite a practical thing in some situations. So if you would like to find inspiration from successful projects, you can find information on all funded individual fellowships, but also on all the other funded Horizon 2020 projects published on a website called Cordis. It's really a lot of information available there, including abstracts and information on the beneficiary and on the grant amounts, etc. You can apply filters, so you can look for projects funded in your research area, for example, or also you can look for projects funded with Swiss hosting institutions. Irina did such a search for you, and I am showing you here a first example of a project called Potion, which is carried out at the Ligentech company and which just started at the beginning of this month. And if you follow the link, actually, that is indicated here in the full name of the project, you will get much more information about this project. So I'm not going into detail here, but in case you're interested, anyway, you will receive the presentation after today's event, and then you could also just briefly have a look there. And there's a second example. This is a project called Armor, which is carried out at Depsys company. And here the EU contribution is roughly 109,000 euro, as we saw in the finances part of my presentation. I included also here the link in case you want to get more information about this project. Proposals must be submitted electronically using the European Commission's online submission service, which is accessible via the Funding and Tenders portal. The proposal should be prepared, as I mentioned, by the researcher in cooperation with the host organization or the supervisor at the host organization. Yes, the host organization usually is represented by the main supervisor in the framework of the proposal. Yes, and proposals, this is quite important, they can be created and submitted by both the supervisor or the researcher. The submission of the proposal and other actions that follow this procedure, such as withdrawal, they fall under the responsibility of the applicant organization, as represented by the main supervisor. And only one proposal per researcher may be submitted to this call. But it is possible to submit various proposals with the same host. Like a company can submit several proposals, just making sure that they have the capacity, of course, to host researchers working on projects at their premises. But one individual researcher can only submit one proposal per call. And as a host organization, each host organization must have a participant identification code, or short PIC. And in case you should need such a PIC, this is not a big thing. You can find here, if you follow the link on this slide, you can get to the registration for such a PIC number. Yes, and I would like to conclude this session slowly by giving you the following 4 take-home messages. So this I would like you to remember from my presentation today. So first one, applying for an individual fellowship offers benefits for researchers as well as for institutions. I briefly repeat that on institutional level. So for your company, a good reason to apply for such an individual fellowship together with a researcher is that you can host this researcher working on a project funded by the EU. And with the help of an IF, now viewed from the researcher's perspective, with the help of an IF, researchers can diversify their competences. They can acquire new skills through advanced training and mobility, and they could also, as Irina said, propose themselves as potential qualified R&D employees. You could either apply for an IF with a researcher who has already been working at your company. Just make sure that it wasn't more than 3 years in the 5 years prior to the call deadline, which is 9th September this year. Or you look for candidates on the market who you will either recruit anyway or offer them a position on the condition they will get the funding. In any case, don't be shy to ask for our support. If the project is funded, you will get roughly 200,000 Swiss francs for the 2 years of the duration of the project. And finally, we are really happy to support you. With this, I would like to thank you for your attention. Yes, and I wish you a nice day, but I will still be available, of course, to answer questions in the course of this event.
Thank you a lot, Sibylla. I very briefly take the floor just to mention that is probably important. Sibylla mentioned the trainings we will be offering for proposal writing. I'd just like to stress that unlike this session, which is really open to everybody and which has the objective of making you learn the basics about the Marie Curie Individual Fellowship Grant, the training is really for those companies and those candidates who came together. What I mean by that the company who would send a candidate, a potential grantee, to the training has to check before that he or she is eligible, and we're here to help for that. And if the candidate has to have an identified host institution and a supervisor. So this is the basics, and this is why we do this info session right now, to help you to actually identify in the coming weeks and months the potential candidates and possibly subscribe them for the training. Or if they cannot come to the training, actually we have a very good tutorial, and the tutorial is online, and this is something they can also use to write their proposal. So I actually myself stop here. Maybe I'd like to ask Sibylla to actually share her screen, and we can welcome now. I see Panayotis is with us from the US. So he was also presenting right now, I think, a research paper. Thank you, Panayotis, for joining, and I give you the floor for actually your testimonial, which I think will be very helpful. Thank you, Panayotis.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Now we have to say all the salutations throughout the day, because we're not sure with over Zoom or over all the other teleconferencing capacity we have at which time zone we're talking at. I'm glad to be joining this Euresearch web seminar, and I'll be telling you about our testimonial of a successful application to the Marie Curie Fellowship. So I'm working with Depsys. Depsys, in brief, is a company that is the Swiss Army knife for distribution system operators for electric power systems at the distribution level, medium and low voltage. The company was founded in 2012. It numbers more than 50 people, work with more than 50 utilities and in more than 10 countries in Europe and Asia. And we currently hold 3 offices, the central being in Switzerland, a second one in Essen in Germany, and a third one in downtown Core in Singapore. Our product, Grid-Eye, it works on power system monitoring and control. So it combines edge computing and central insight for power systems. The reason for that is that we want to make the grid observable, and by making the grid observable, we're making it, first of all, more stable, and also we're making it more efficient, thus procuring savings for all the participants and, of course, for the end users. This is like, sort of speak, the identity of DEPSIS. Let me now tell you a little bit about how DEPSIS experienced the process of the Marie Curie Fellowship. DEPSIS was seeking for, DEPSIS got interested in the Marie Curie Fellowship because there are many, literally, like very high numbers of research questions that we have to answer with regards to distribution system operation. And the resources are limited even if you are a big company, let alone a startup like DEPSIS. DEPSIS also had many successful experiences with other national European funded projects. And of course, Euresearch, thank you very much again, Euresearch, for this. Euresearch was super kind and super resourceful and efficient in informing us and educating us about this opportunity, the opportunity for the Marie Curie. The approach that DEPSIS takes in selecting applicants and then applying with those applicants for a Marie Curie fellowship is a two-step one. The first one is to identify the relevant program, in this case the SE, advertise the position via the career website, LinkedIn, or other forums. Personally, I was just approached by a friend of mine, Greek, who worked at the time in DEPSIS and told me, hey, we're looking for a researcher on these topics. Then the candidate's profile are gathered and assessed with a submission, with an online submission, and the candidates are selected by, with regards to their CV, according to their CV, a description of their capacities and their excellence. There follows an interview, and of course, we move forward with the proposal preparation. We try to match as possible the R&D topics that DEPSIS is interested in, as also the backgrounds and the aspirations of the selected candidates. Then we use the Euresearch material. There is lots of that. So if you are planning on writing a Marie Curie fellowship application, please do use all Euresearch material. And I mean literally all its material. Workshop material, webinar, documents, past proposals with remarks and evaluations, everything. Every little bit is very important and very interesting, and Euresearch has done a great job in collecting this material and systemizing it for applicants. We then discuss the topic with the selected candidates, assist the candidates in preparing the proposals. Since I joined DEPSIS 2 years ago as a Marie Curie Fellow, I have also been involved in helping, assisting, reviewing, evaluating, and proposing some valuable pointers to following applicants. So the Marie Curie Fellows that have recently joined DEPSIS have submitted to me also their proposals, and also gave them an eye over the ideas they have presented. Euresearch also reviews the proposals, and at last we submit the proposals. One very important point, although it is in grey here, if the application didn't work the first year, it is worth to revise the proposal, give it another try. Our experience shows that the vast majority of second-time applicants go through and get the grant, which is an interesting remark that we want to bring in the table, even though it cannot be possibly representing a statistically valid, broad view of the whole application process. Now, pros and cons of Euresearch support. The pros, of course, is that they are informing us about the different possibilities. They offer us answers to all our questions. They do the pre-review of the proposal, and they clarify the submission steps, which is also very important. The only con, if we could even say this as a con, is that the candidates may not be able to attend the proposal preparation workshops since they are abroad due to mobility rule. Other than that, all the other points are very much valid, and the applicants will have will tap into the great resources of Euresearch and have definitely a path forward with their application. From this point on, I will be going full personal, talking about my experience with the Marie Curie grant. I graduated as a PhD from the Electrical Computer Engineering Department of National Technical University of Athens in Greece in 2015. I tried my first Marie Curie grant in 2015 as a global fellowship. That fellowship failed. In 2016, I joined as a postdoctoral research associate at a university in the US. And in 2017, I applied for the application, and that time I got accepted. So, why did I apply? This is a very interesting question that I believe will be interesting either to applicants, because you want to self-reflect and consider, is this grant for me? Can this actually help me? How it can help me? But it also applies to companies that are seeking to get researchers join them through the Marie Curie grant. So these points might be valuable in order to assess whether or not the applicant is interested enough or matches the company's profile. So why did I apply? I wanted to launch high-end R&D intensive career in the EU energy industry. My latest R&D work and aims were very relevant to the host development aims, so there was a match made in heaven there. Of course, I have much interest in the host's, DEPSI's smart grid profile, and I was also culturally and professionally interested in Geneva and Switzerland as a whole. Keep these 4 points in mind. We might see them again later. As for the application, my application was that to have a very solid R&D idea and be able to communicate it. The R&D idea must have a core part, which is very important, as also secondary implications. Okay, we might have a core scientific part that is very important. However, its extensions and its implication in other fields is also very interesting to be noted in the application. The idea impact must be broad and reach all the way to the public. So, we do not do research, for example, in my field, just because I thought of another algorithm to improve the efficiency of previously existing algorithms. No. Even by this very abstract example, everything in the power system industry, everything, boils down to societal cost of electricity energy. So how much does the bill cost of energy for the end customer? There you are. I went from a very specific, almost completely abstract idea for the society, all the way to the point that my idea is very important for its societal impact in the energy bill of end customers and the general public. The career development and the new professional horizons are very critical. We should be showing an aspiration for new opportunities, for opening up in the new industry, and so on. And of course, have the host aligned with the idea and offer much material for the proposal. Let's see what my evaluation read, which is kind of important because we will circle back in many of the remarks I made earlier. My score in the part of excellence. Excellence refers to the part of the idea per se. What do I propose to do in my research? What scientific topics does it touch? How well did I describe the scientific topics and my scientific aims? So this got a 4.2 out of 5. The strength, as they were mentioned by the reviewers, is that the idea was interesting. The state of the art was detailed. State of the art is the literature review or the industry review, depends on what you are doing. The solid training plan and an international networking, because this shows that I'm also going to not just get ideas out of my head or just within the small premises of the company, but also make sure that the idea is bulletproof with regards to what is the scientific consensus worldwide, that the capacity of the host is appropriate to host this scientific research, the objectives and the aims are clear and very interesting to the industry, and my research background was appropriate to support me. The weaknesses, usually these are the more important because they offer us knowledge for the path forward in other applications. The research, the methodology was insufficiently detailed. This is true. This was actually true, and I acknowledge that because at the moment that I was developing the idea, I didn't have a very clear path as the field itself has not been clearly formed. We are actually doing kind of groundbreaking work, although I do not consider it groundbreaking because it is a legacy from another idea at another part of power systems. But again, the research on this topic was kind of limited, so the research methodology wasn't sufficiently detailed. Interdisciplinary aspects are sufficiently detailed. Of course, I also admit to that, but it wouldn't apply to the idea anyway, although it is one of the criteria that are posed. As for the impact, a pure 5 out of 5. Remember the 4 bullets I told you earlier? Why am I interested to do this research with the Marie Curie Fellowship? Because, as I was telling you, I want to have new research, new career opportunities, expansion into the EU market, and so on. All of these, plus, of course, the impact of the idea itself to various fields and beyond what is the specific field I was applying my research at. All of these nice points were summarized here in the impact part and were all considered strong points of my application. Skills gained adequate, various channels of dissemination, and the exploitation of results properly addressed. As for the implementation is essentially the management plan. It was comprehensive, suitable training, something that we saw also in the excellence part. So many parts of the training could be copy-pasted here. Of course, don't do that, just like rephrase them and give them another direction. Ample resources available, and a management plan to be clear. The weaknesses, all of them are true, and I acknowledge them, and I'm actually practicing whatever I was advised to improve in my research. The milestones were not very detailed, they needed more metrics. The supervision plan was not very detailed. I had a small objection here because I had a very dense supervision plan with monthly reports. Maybe they wanted more metrics there, and the risk analysis was not clear. Usually when you write the risks of the research, you have to do 2 things. Quantify the impact, how impactful one risk is to your research, and how probable it is. Usually this risk analysis needs to be very detailed and is usually put in a table. In tables you can have smaller fonts, so you can write some more detail about how to handle this risk without sacrificing much of your extent of the proposal. What helped in all my process? A solid, current, well thought and well communicated idea. It is very, very important for you to be able to communicate your idea to a lay audience. Although usually experts review these ideas, it is important to be able to give a lay description because it trickles down into the impact. The impact has to be as broad as possible and have implications in the society. My previous experience, of course, from the failed attempt at the Marie Curie Fellowship, my fruitful collaboration of common goals with the host, and of course, again, I repeat this and stress it wholeheartedly, the supporting material for Euresearch. It was like an encyclopedia to me. Whenever I would be I would query myself, I would question myself, am I sure that I want to phrase this right? Let me see what.
Panos, I think that's fine.
So this is my overall description, my overall presentation of what were my experiences with the presentation of the submission and of the application of the Marie Curie grant with DEPSIS, and of course with the help of Euresearch.
Thank you very much, Panos. I think without much transition, I will actually open the floor for questions we have gathered from the chat. And I'll try to either address myself or, of course, give questions to Panos or to Sibylla. So maybe one for Panos straight away. What is the motivation for a company to host an international fellow who is mobile and who will leave after his fellowship? Who is the owner of the game's IP?
I'm trying to find the question to read it as well.
So if you want me, I can repeat it. What is the motivation for a company to host an international fellow who is mobile and who will leave after his fellowship? Who is the owner of the gained IP?
Who is the owner of the what? This I didn't hear. Yeah, you have some echo in your room.
Sorry, of the intellectual property.
The intellectual property falls under the so-called green intellectual property management, if I recall correctly, which means that whatever you publish has to be published in some kind of open access or have some preprints in a website so they can be open to the public. As for the intellectual property, if I recall correctly, when we're talking about a company, the intellectual property belongs to the company. However, the research results are made public and available to everyone.
Yes, and maybe I'll add something on this. Clearly, the intellectual property belongs to the company. As for the publication of results, of course, if something is needs to be totally protected, you can clearly also get out of the full publication of results. Sibylla, you will certainly complement this point. And maybe to add concerning the fellow, what is the interest for a company? Just to be clear, when a fellowship is funded, the person, the grantee who will be funded has to become the employee of the company or has to be already the employee of the company. So usually when the interest for the company is actually to fund an experienced researcher to one project, and the fellow after these 2 funded years can of course stay also with the company as a regular employee. I don't know if Sibylla, you want to complement these answers.
Thank you. Just about the IP, I think one of the advantages of this panel is that you will get evaluators who really are into the non-academic world. And as Irina said, it is absolutely possible also to disclose certain information that you really don't want to give out. So I think, and in general, IP is with the company, IP that is generated. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Maybe another question to Sibylla. Mm-hmm. Can we apply for this for our current researchers? You basically answered it already, but maybe just to remind.
Yes, if there is a current employee working in the company and has not been working in the company for more than 3 years in the 5 years before 9th September, this person would be perfectly eligible to apply with this specific company for an individual fellowship. So the answer is yes, it is possible, but the researcher has to comply with the mobility rule.
And another question also close to the eligibility criteria, can it be actually the researcher a Swiss citizen?
I cannot hear you very well, Irina, I'm sorry.
Can the researcher be a Swiss citizen?
Absolutely. Nationality is not taken into account with regards to eligibility. So the nationality really doesn't count there. So it can be a Swiss researcher, can also be a researcher from anywhere. Mm-hmm.
Another question for Sibylla.
Mm-hmm.
Must the supervisor have a scientific background, PhD, or publications?
I would say yes, but that's not written anywhere. But you have to describe in what sense the supervisor is is a good match for you. And as a supervisor, I think you should be able to draw from your experience. And therefore, I would say, yes, it is certainly a good thing if the supervisor himself or herself has experience in research. I would say yes. Also, probably PhD, I would say rather yes, but it's not written anywhere what kind of qualifications a supervisor needs to have. It's just what they say is that this should be the optimal person to give you the training and the advice you actually you need on this very project in order to advance your skills as a researcher, the skills you want to advance during this 2-year period of project. Mm-hmm.
A question I will address. Do you hear me, Sibylla?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The question is the following. Basically, if the company is founded after the application deadline, but before the start date of the grant, is it eligible?
I think the problem is that as host institution, you need such a PIC code. And if the company is not yet founded at the date of the call deadline, it's not possible to submit an application with this particular organization because it has no PIC code, no PIC number.
Yes, absolutely. I confirm it. Actually, any company participating in any type of European project has to be legally established before the application to a code. Mm-hmm. So the PIC code is obtainable only if the company is legally established. Thank you. Yes. Maybe another question for Thanos. Does the host have to report on results or milestones throughout the project or at the end?
To our knowledge, I hope you can hear me, just checking my sound. To our knowledge, you have to report only at the end of the project. So we even asked actually our manager, project manager at the European Commission specifically, if he wants a mid-project presentation, and he said, no, we're cool. If you want to do it, it's fine. It's for you if you want to get some feedback. But other than that, the only report they're expecting is the report at the end of the project. So if you feel that you want some guidance from your manager, just because your manager has experience with overseeing grants, please reach out to them after you have started the research and tell them, hey, dear manager, we would like to get some feedback from you. We prepared like 5-10 slides of what we've been doing to the day, and we would like some ideas if our project's on good standing, if we need to update something, and so on and so forth. So it is just for your benefit. Other than that, according to the contracts we know so far, you only have to report at the end of the project period, after the 2 years, that is.
I can confirm that, Panos. It's the final report that has to be submitted at the end of the project within 60 days after the end of the project. And there is some continuous reporting, for example, in case you have some ethical aspects that were described in your application, in your proposal, then they will ask you to continuously deliver these things, for example, ethics, or also if you included a data management plan. These are things you have to upload continuously. But other reporting is just at the end of the project.
Thank you. I see there's still a question for clarification concerning the case of Swiss citizens. I will reply to that. basically a Swiss citizen can be a grantee if he complies with the mobility rule. That means that in the last 5 years, before the deadline of the call, he was a maximum of 3 years living and working in Switzerland. So if the researcher is complying with this rule, which would be the case, for example, of the researcher coming back from abroad to Switzerland, this works. I have another question coming in. Does the overall Marie Curie budget covers taxes related to the grantee as employee in the company?
Mm-hmm.
Basically, what is going on with the social charges?
So the amounts I presented, they are gross amounts. And all the social security fees or taxes, they have to be deducted from the amounts I showed.
Nasser, would you want to voice yourself if you want to, if you have a precision on that question? No, all fine. Because the answer is also the fact that the social charges are paid by the company as a regular salary, right? It's just paid out as for any other employee in the company.
Exactly. Yeah.
Actually, my question was more related to in my budget preparation. Do I have to exclude or include these taxes in the overall budget?
In your company budget preparation, or in the preparation of the budget for the submission? What
yes,
do you mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
For the submission,
yes.
There you don't have to prepare any budget. You have to enter how long you want this IF to last, so the month.
Yes.
Where it should be, where the host institution is located. So this will have an influence on the country correction coefficient. And the third thing that is determining for the budget is if the researcher has family obligations. So in case he or she has family obligations, it will be €500 per month more in the budget. But it's really unit cost. So for every month of fellowship you ask, you will get 1 unit of all the different cost categories. So every month is worth the living allowance, mobility allowance, family allowance, and also research training networking costs, plus institutional and and overheads. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm jumping in on this to also add a comment here for everyone. If you don't have ethics concerns with your proposal or other kind of complicating documentation matters, so for example, for engineering, which is my field, for example, the submission process is very, very, very straightforward. Check boxes, drop-down menus, and just write the proposal, the B1 part. Everything else is almost automatic. The budget is calculated automatically by the form. Do you agree with ethics? Yes. The whole thing goes great. You move on to the next page. So keep in mind that the proposal, the weight you have to give to the proposal is on the proposal writing per se. Those pages with excellence, impact, and management plan, this is your main weight. All the others are very straightforward. I would say takes less than a half hour to fill it out. Most of the proposal is just drop boxes and check boxes, so you should not be worrying about these sort of secondary matters. If you have to, Euresearch is there for you, I know that, and most probably you will not have to worry about this kind of questions. So just to clarify all these procedural questions about the application, because I believe you need to be focusing and caring more about the proposal writing per se.
Thank you very much, Panos. I have 2 questions which are very similar. First is the maximum duration of the grant 24 months? And is it okay if the project takes more than 24 months, even if the funding is limited to 24 months?
So the answer to the first question is yes. In this Society and Enterprise panel, the maximum project duration is 24 months. So you will get maximum funding for 24 months. And there is another panel, the Career Restart panel, that has its own eligibility criteria. There, a project can last up to 36 months, and you will get funding for up to 36 months. Regarding, what was the second one? Sorry. What was again the second part of the question? If it can last longer. No, actually, what you describe in the proposal should be a standalone project that can be done in the 2 years with the money you get from basically in the 2 years funded by the EU. If then afterwards you continue on working on this project with other funding, that's none of the EU's concern. That can be done, of course, but what you describe in the proposal should be a project that will last approximately 2 years to get the funding for the 2 years. You can also go for just 1 year. Most of the people go for 2 years, but this is also possible, or for 18 months, for example.
Thank you. I have a question.
Jumping in on this again to also share, this is experience that I have also from other projects, and I believe it might be valuable to offer this here. Again, take this with a grain of salt, and Euresearch can correct me on this. As Sibylla said, the duration that you're submitting for 10, 12, 18, 24 months, whatever months, these are the ones that are agreed to be funded. There are some articles in the annex that might be saying it for extreme situations, special conditions, there might be an extension. It doesn't clarify, but I believe this is a no-cost extension, most probably meaning that you can keep working on the material or on the research for whatever reason you might want to do that, but you will not be getting funding for this. In this sense, the company needs to be funding you, so we go outside the framework of this discussion. Another thing that came up with COVID, I don't think that you will care about this for now, but you know, next year we might have another outbreak of COVID, so this might be interesting for any of you who might apply and get the grant early. The European Commission put out an announcement saying that if you're affected by the COVID lockdowns, we are open to a discussion on your contracts. This is a case by case, not a horizontal rule saying that, oh, everything changes, we're extending everyone's by 1, 2, 3x months just because we had the COVID. So, as Sibylla said, you always go for a grant application of X months, you are funded for X months, and everything else you should consider it to be an extreme case that will most probably not be funded by the European Commission. But if you have to do it, it's going to be a very extreme condition. You should be most probably avoiding it. For the COVID case that we are all facing together, after all, as the European Commission has announced, it will be a case-by-case arrangement regarding to whether or not the results and the collection of them were affected. Just to add this here.
Thank you, Panos, for this very helpful comment. I had a question on infrastructure. Must the research infrastructure, labs, for instance, be located in the host organization, so in our case, the company, or can it also be somewhere else? Maybe for Sibylla.
Mm-hmm. The thing is that in the proposal, you need to describe the infrastructure, that basically you can use the infrastructure necessary to carry out this proposed project successfully. And if this infrastructure is not within this chosen host institution, I think this is not per se a problem, but you need to describe how to kind of overcome this, this situation where you don't have the infrastructure in the specific host institution. So I would say, no, it doesn't have to be necessarily in the host institution. It's also possible, for example, if you have to carry out a special, or you need a special device, or you need a special lab to carry out a part of the experimentation, then you go there. But this should be described in the proposal, actually.
I have here a question I can address, and maybe Sibylle can complement. Could the host be a startup? Is there any minimum of persons? I would say yes, the host can be a startup as long as we consider that this is what we call a startup, is a legally established company. Concerning the minimum number of personnel, we had actually rather small companies with, let's say, 2-3 employees winning Marie Curie individual fellowships. These were cases typically where most of the employees, if not all of them, were researchers. What you definitely need is a supervising capacity in the company inside. So at least one employee who is an experienced researcher, this is the best solution, who will supervise the project. Sibylle, I don't know if you have a comment to that.
Yes, I agree fully with what you said, and I know examples of startups who successfully applied for a fellowship. They could just justify that they have the necessary capacity to host such a researcher. I think this is the important point. You should really make it clear in the proposal, and if you can justify that you have the capacity to host, I think it's absolutely possible to host as a startup.
I will address also another question directly. Is there a limit on applications per company? For example, trying to fund a candidate already in your team while also looking for other candidates that can apply in parallel. No, there is no limit. It's more a question of common sense depending on the size of the company.
Mm-hmm.
We see in the case of Justice, which is a scale-up, that they were able to secure several Marie Curie from the same pool.
But not for the same project. I think this is very important.
This is very important. So each applicant is applying for a different project. We see that same type of things happening in big corporations. But let's say for a smaller startup, it's very important that it has the organizational capacity to carry out several projects at the same time. So probably we wouldn't recommend for a smaller company to apply with numerous candidates, but more than one is definitely possible. So probably I will move to another question. There was maybe clarification needed on the number of organizations participating in such a Marie Curie individual fellowship. Can there be any collaborating organization involved, or is it always one host institution, one company?
It is always one hosting institution, but what I didn't mention, because I didn't want to confuse you too much, there is actually the possibility to go on a secondment. This can be from 1 to 6 months stay at other organizations' premises in order to do certain work there. So, meaning that for these 1 to 6 months secondment, there you would need a partner organization. So in such a case, if you would include such secondment in your project, in the 24 months of the project, then you would have the hosting institution, which will be the beneficiary, plus a partner organization hosting you in the time when you are on secondment. And also there, you should have someone to supervise you.
Another question for you. Can a granted application be transferred from one researcher to another if they meet the same criteria and have a similar background?
No, this is not possible. This has never been allowed. Sometimes it is possible that a granted application is transferred to a new institution because, for example, the professor, the supervisor died, or but it is actually, as I said, it is personal funding, and in the proposal you describe also, among other things, your potential to become an independent researcher. You describe your track record. And this is really a personal grant, and it's not transferable to a new candidate, even though the background is the same. This will not be allowed.
Thank you. I have a question, probably more from the researcher perspective. Somebody is asking how to find a suitable enterprise company hosting for Marie Curie individual fellowship in a particular research field. The person could not find any Swiss companies in Net4Mobility or on other European websites. Typically we don't have ourselves, Euresearch, any offering for matchmaking between companies and researchers. This is maybe something we could implement in the future with web-based tools as we're using right now, but this is just a dream. Of course, there's not many proposals on the European website, simply because a lot of companies don't know about the Marie Curie individual fellowships, and especially about the enterprise panel, because it was established only in 2016, and I promoted it in Canton of Vaud since 2017, I think. So the best way is really either to contact directly companies, to research companies which are active in specific fields, or eventually also to post an expression of interest as a researcher on European websites. I don't know if, Sibylle, you join me in this, or if you have other ideas.
Yes, I wanted to say exactly the same thing. I mean, on the European website, you can also, as an individual, place expressions of interest, and like this, maybe one or the other company will notice you there. But what I think also is a good option, if you identify companies working in your field of expertise, I mean, it's also possible to just contact them and ask them if they would be willing to go for such an application together with you.
I'd like to mention again, this is exactly what happened to some of the candidates. I was actually contacted by companies in Vaud who received offers, who didn't know about Marie Curie individual fellowships, and who decided to go into an application because a researcher contacted them. Mm-hmm. A little question on the TRLs. Can the funded proposal project go above TRL 6? Typically up to TRL
9. I would say, as long as you can still propose a research project that is an excellent project, and yes, I would say there's no limit, but of course it should be just still a research project.
Thank you. I will quickly answer another question. Can the funding period of this grant be combined with another grant as long as the other grant is okay? I am not sure if I understand it correctly, but if in the European grants there is a rule that there's no double funding of the same activity. So as long as you apply, for example, for a Marie Curie individual fellowship at the company with a grantee, and in parallel you do European EIC accelerator, and these projects concentrate on different activities, different objectives, you can fund them both, but there is no double funding possible. I think there is another one for Sibylla. Is there any rule for residency? Do I have to prove the time spent at host institution, or can I freely move among places depending on project needs?
I don't understand this question. Sorry. I can read it. Just a moment. I have it here. Is there any rule for residency? Do I have to prove the time spent at host institution? Or can I freely move among places depending on project needs? Yes, there is need for residency, because actually they want you to move. But I mean, you cannot be imprisoned in your future host institution, that's for sure. And if you need to go somewhere for a certain part of the project, then I think it would be best to already indicate this in the proposal. But it's not that you should be imprisoned and are not free anymore to move. I mean, but it's just that the main activity should for sure be in the future host institution to comply with the rules of this fellowship.
Thank you. I have just another question, and I think we will stop the Q&A here because we're quite late and just to the programming schedule we gave. The question is about, is it possible in the proposal to describe supervision by more than one supervisor?
It is possible to have certain assistance by someone else than the main supervisor, but it's only they want you to have one supervisor that is really assigned to you and your project. And if then in the proposal you describe that for certain part of the work you will be supervised or guided by a member of the lab or someone who is also employed in this company, who is expert in a certain method or field, then this also, I think, would be best to be described in the proposal already. But the answer is basically no, it's just one supervisor that you can have.
Thank you, Sibylla. Now I'm really moving just to one slide with some wrap-up and conclusion comments. So here we go. I hope you can see my slide. So just some major take-off messages. Basically, I think from all of us, and then I'll let Sibylla and Thomas just comment if they think something is important to say at this point. I believe that for companies now, what is important for those who are interested to actually apply with the proposal is basically start the search for adequate candidates. And as soon as you find a person who is interesting for you, just immediately check the eligibility with Euresearch. Best is directly to write to Marie Curie, MSCA at Euresearch to ask the question. You can send directly the potential grantee this email, and he or she could verify. Then, if you find excellent candidates, just immediately enroll them in training. If the training is available, this would be a case with a specific one for companies end of July. Or if they cannot join the training, ask Marie Curie team for access to the tutorial. As Panos told in the previous years, the trainings were indeed face-to-face. But now we have, of course, a webinar training, so people from abroad will be able to join it. And of course, then starts the proposal preparation. After you have a good draft, don't hesitate to submit it for proposal review. As Sibylle mentioned, we offer these first come, first served basis. And from myself, the message is for those who are new to my services is really explore other European R&D opportunities with Euresearch, and you can always contact me to ask questions on other grants. Sibylle, would you like to add one or two words concerning this important message from your side?
I think you wrapped it up perfectly, Irina. Thank you very much. I think I just leave it like that.
Thank you. Panos, anything you'd like to say to the candidates as a conclusion?
I want to wish everyone good luck, because besides all your efforts, you also need to have some good luck. Tap into all these materials, feel confident about your research. Even if you get rejected the first time, retry again. Your research is always valuable, because this is what keeps the world going forward. And I hope that my contribution was also helpful in the process of your considering either applying as researchers or hosting researchers through your institution.
Thank you very much, Panos. I'd like really to thank both Panos and Sibylle. Panos joined us from the US, so it's great that you could provide some time to address the participants. Sibylle, thank you very much for all of your insights.
And thank you for organizing. This is really good.
Thanks for organizing.
Mm-hmm.
I think with this, we will end this session. And of course, people are welcome to contact me and Sibylle later on with any questions, follow-up questions. We will send a follow-up email with the presentations in the coming days. Hopefully tomorrow everything will go out. Thank you, guys. And just let's stay in touch. All keep safe, healthy, and I guess talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.